Alright, what's up folks? So, back again today. I know this seems kind of like a pretty poorly prepared video because it is kind of spur of the moment. Some upsetting, I don't mean that like a bad thing, although maybe it's a bad thing, but pretty big upset today in the toy collecting community. Really wanted to make sure I had the McFarlane DC Multiverse collection in the background for this video. I know I probably got the Marvel Legends collection sticking in on the side, but uh, oh well. So, woke up today, checked my phone, and the first thing I see is Mattel has won back the license to make DC toys based on DC superheroes and DC superhero characters, comic book characters, and whatnot. And this is kind of an upset because, for those of you that don't know, um, Mattel had the license for like 10 years. From 2005 till 2016, they had the license, and kind of thought it was never going to leave Mattel. Like Hasbro has had the Star Wars license for God knows how long, and they've had the Marvel license now for like, I don't know, well over a decade. Um, yeah, so when Mattel lost the license to McFarlane, it was a bit of like a whoa, you know. But especially to McFarlane, because at that point in time, McFarlane Toys was not really a mass retail toy company. It really wasn't in stores. You didn't really see much come out of McFarlane Toys except for like statues and shit like that. But uh, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing because in the last like few years that Mattel had the DC license, they really dropped the ball and the figures were really suffering in quality. So when McFarlane picked it up, people were kind of like, all right, let's see what they can do. Now, let's back it up a little bit here. When Mattel first had the DC license, they were teamed up with this third-party toy company called the Four Horsemen, and those guys were doing all the sculpting and the detailing of the figures, and they are the reason that the figures turned out as nice as they did. When you look back at older Mattel DC figures like DC Universe Classics and like the what else they have, the DC Unlimited line, um, those were all, especially DC Universe Classics, those were made with working with the Four Horsemen. After the Four Horsemen left, like they stopped working with Mattel and they went off to do their own thing. They created Mythic Legions, which is their own toy company, toy line. Sorry. That's when the Mattel DC stuff really started to suffer. Uh, and looking at it now, after like reading about everything today about how they've gotten it back, the way I see this is, like I said, McFarlane Toys was never, it had not been a mass retail toy company like that you find in like Walgreens and Walmarts and Targets and all that kind of shit. You hadn't found that with McFarlane for a long time, not since the 90s. They hit the scene really strong in the 90s with their Spawn toy line, but since then, like Todd McFarlane is an artsy art. He's a very artsy kind of guy. Like this is a guy that says like he would not know how to sell a book with just printed words in it and no images. And it's like those are just called books, Todd. And like Barnes and Noble's full of them. They sell millions of books every, like I don't know what you're talking about. Like he's a very visual kind of guy. If he cannot if his eyes do not pick up some kind of cool visual spectacle, he's not interested in the thing he's looking at. So that's Todd McFarlane, and that had led him to away from like action figures and more towards just like statues. Like Todd McFarlane's figures always had like a little teeny tiny bit of articulation just so that they could meet the bare bones definition of action figure, but really they were just statues. Because, when you have to worry about putting in, articulated joints and moving parts and stuff like that, you have to sacrifice sculpting detail, and where that's more artsy. Like it's art versus engineering, and Todd wanted to do more art stuff, so that's why his toy line went that direction. So hearing that Mattel lost the license to McFarlane was a bit of an upset in and of itself because we're sitting here thinking like he's not a mass retail action figure guy. His company's not a mass retail action figure company. How did this happen? Well, looking at it now, what I think, and this is just my speculation, what I think happened was Mattel let the license be taken. You know, they kind of let McFarlane outbid them for it because Mattel was probably like, all right, look, we lost Four Horsemen, we don't work with them anymore, and our toy line is suffering. The sculpts have not been as good, the paint have not been as good, the quality control has not been as good. We need to take a step back rather than pay a bunch of money to have this license and then just keep producing shit quality figures. We need to just just let the license go for the time being, take a step back, and kind of figure out again how to make action figures unto ourselves. And they did that over the past few years with their Masters of the Universe Masterverse line. That line started out pretty rough, but it has since then come into its own, and the figures in that line are pretty cool. I know Masters of the Universe is not everyone's cup of tea, He-Man and all that stuff, but I own several of the Masterverse figures, and I can attest that, like, yeah, Hasbro kind of, not Hasbro, I'm sorry, Mattel kind of figured their shit out. And now that they've got their shit figured out, it seems they feel confident in their ability to make action figures again. It seems that now they're going back and taking the license back. And this should not come as a surprise to anyone that they're able to do this, because you're looking at Mattel, which is this big, huge international toy company, versus McFarlane Toys, which, prior to having the DC license, wasn't known for shit. It wasn't in mass retail stores. They didn't really make action figures. They just made very minimally articulated statues. So the reason I'm looking at this now going, the reason McFarlane got the license in the first place is because Mattel basically just like gave it up to them. They didn't really fight for it. Mattel took a step back to figure their own shit out. Now that they've figured their shit out, they want the DC license back. That being said, in the past, McFarlane, I'm going to try my best not to mix up McFarlane and Mattel in this. McFarlane started making DC Multiverse figures. They've released their first batch of them in early 2020. And yes, they had a rough start, but that's to be expected. Masterverse, Mattel's line, had a rough start. When Hasbro took over making Marvel Legends from Toy Biz, they had a rough start. It takes a while to really find your groove, and I'm happy to report that, like, in 2022, that was the year that McFarlane DC Multiverse found its groove in terms of character variety and better sculpts and better paint. Like, you can see how many I have here on the shelf. I have quite a few of them. And I was kind of all in invested on this line. As of like about a year ago, my way of collecting DC figures is very different from my way of collecting Marvel. My way of collecting Marvel is I'll buy anything, pretty much. My way with DC is I have eras that I collect. The 3 eras are New 52, Post-Crisis Pre-New 52, and they have not made any figures for this era yet, but as soon as they start making toys for the absolute DC universe, that'll be the 3rd era. So I kind of have the shelves, like, this is supposed to be more like New 52. I understand that Wonder Woman looks a little bit more like a rebirth. Superman is definitely not New 52. They've never made a New 52 Superman. I've had to, like, put some placeholders in there. But for the most part, this shelf here is New 52. And then this one down here is just going to be what I was planning on being post-Crisis, pre-New 52, pre-Flashpoint. And I was fine with that because even though there is another toy line out there that does both of those eras better in toy form, those other lines that do it better are dead. They're dead lines. They're finished. Like for post-Crisis, pre-Flashpoint, you would go with DC Universe Classics from Mattel. If you really want to get every character relevant to the New 52 in figure form, you would go with DC Collectibles New 52 line. Now, I get it, DC Collectibles was not big on articulation. It was more about sculpt and paint detail, but I'm not big on articulation either. Like, I like it. It's a nice bonus, but, like, this is what I'm going to do with my figures. I'm going to put them on a shelf in some kind of very cool, stoic portrait display pose type deal, and that's going to be it. I'm not really going to do a whole bunch of, like, crazy posing around with my toys. I do it with a few, like, characters that it lends itself to, like Spider-Man and stuff, but most of the time it's just like this. Call me vanilla if you want. That's the way it is. So articulation, I could take it or leave it. As long as the pose and the sculpting is great, I'm into it. Not the pose. As long as the sculpting and the paint are great, I'm all for it. I would honestly collect small 1/12 scale statues if they made every single character. What you tend to find, though, with statue lines is they focus on, like, the big main characters and they don't make a lot of the obscure characters. Like, I don't think we would ever get a Ted Cord Blue Beetle in a statue line, but we get them in a figure line. So that's the difference, and that's why I collect figures mostly instead of statues. But what has kept me from just, like, once I decided to do the collect this way by era of DC, what kept me from selling all these and buying the New 52 line from DC Collectibles and the DC Universe Classics line was the fact that those lines are dead. And I told myself, like, okay, well, you already started with this line. You're a pretty good chunk of the way into it. And there's always the potential that even though McFarlane has not made a figure for that character you're looking for yet, he still could because the line is ongoing. Well, now we know it's ending. Mattel's going to have the license back, and as of like mid-2026, McFarlane's not going to be making any more DC figures. This puts collectors in a bind because this is not like you had the license for 10 plus years and now you're losing it. You know, this is you had the license for 5, and ultimately it's going to come down to 5.5 years. You had the license and made figures. But in that 5.5 years, you pumped out so many figures and so many people bought so many of those figures for it to just end after 5.5 years. Like, I'm sorry, but unless Todd finds it in himself to mandate to his company, hey, fuck our bottom line, fuck our money, and fuck my artsy fartsy bullshit, we're going to do right by the collectors. So much of this line is going to go uncompleted. Like, there are so many characters we still need in this toy line for it to feel like a complete DC toy line. And I just don't see us getting to that point in a year and a half, which I could be wrong, but that kind of sucks. So where I'm at in this boat, which I think is where most collectors are, is like, we now have to sit here and we have to figure out, like, what do we want to do? Do we want to sell this shit off and prepare to buy the new Mattel shit when it comes out? Because if that's what we're going to do, we need to sell earlier than later. Because, like, let's say at Toy Fair coming up here in the near future, Mattel shows up with a bunch of really cool prototypes for their new DC line, and it looks like it's going to be a banger. Well, at that point, everyone's going to want to jump ship and sell all this stuff, which means the value of this stuff is going to go down. And that sucks, right? But at the same time, I don't want to sell it now and then come to find out that Mattel's line is going to be ass. Like, I'm being optimistic about it. They really managed to do a pretty good job with the Masters of the Universe line, the Masterverse line. But if any of you guys remember those figures from like the end of the Mattel DC era, they were garbage. They looked like shit. So we're all just kind of sitting here going like, we don't know what to do because we need more info. We need to see what Mattel is planning. And we need to see it fast, right? Mattel this announcement coming out that they're getting the license back. This is not how I would have done this. I would have, if I was like running Mattel, I'd have been like, the day that the world finds out we're getting the license back is going to be the same day that we unveil figure prototypes. Those things will happen on the exact same day. That way people can see what they're going to be getting and they can make judgments based on that. But that's not what happened today. So now we're all just sitting here not knowing what we should do. My biggest thing that I want to know is, are Mattel's DC figures going forward, are they going to fit more with McFarlane Multiverse in terms of size and scale and stature, or are they going to fit more with previous Mattel shit, like the DC Universe Classics and Mattel's DC Multiverse line? Because those were like 6.5 inch scale, whereas McFarlane's are 7 to 7.5 inch scale. So they won't go together. If Mattel's going to go back to 6 inches, these two lines will not go together. And then we're just sitting here going like, what do we do? Like, I'm sitting here like, I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should go ahead and just be throwing these fuckers on eBay. I kind of want to, just to prepare. But then it's like, okay, I sell all these off, and then the Mattel line turns out to be ass. Or the Mattel line turns out to be great, but they're in a size and scale and they're made in such a way that they would have fit with these on a shelf and looked. I understand that's probably the long shot right there, that like the two lines are going to be fudgeable together on a shelf, but well, you can hope, right? I mean, I don't know. This kind of sucks. I've been doing the math all day thinking about like, well, let's really figure out what characters are still missing from the McFarlane line. And then once you know what you're still missing, kind of make a judgment call. Like maybe, just maybe, you finish out this McFarlane line and then you just call it done on DC and you don't even start collecting the new Mattel stuff. I've thought about that as well. Yeah. I'm not upset that Mattel is getting the license back. I'm upset that they're just kind of like announcing it and then leaving us hanging. Like, tell us what we're going to be working with. Are you guys going to be making 6 or 7 inch scale? Are they going to gel well with McFarlane's figures, or are they not? Like, give us some info. You know, don't just be like, hey, we're going to start making DC toys again and McFarlane's going to stop. But it doesn't tell us everything we need to know. I need to know if I need to dump these. Like, it's not a money thing for me. It's I don't have the space for 2 DCA figure collections. It's a matter of shelf space. I don't have the space for it in my home. I've got my basement, my nerd dungeon cave, whatever, set up the way it's going to be, and I've committed to a certain amount of shelf space, and I'm not going to go over that. So, yeah, it's going to be 1 DC figure collection, and I kind of need to know which one it should be. So, like, I think if the Mattel line is going to be, if we find out that the new Mattel figures going forward are going to kind of be shitty, then I'm just going to go really hard finishing this collection. Actually, no. I don't even know if that's the case. Because like I said, now that I know this one's probably going to end up incomplete, for those eras that I collect, New 52 and post-crisis, pre-Flashpoint, there's better toy lines out there. There are so many scenarios in this whole what if this, what if that situation where it's like most of them, though, say you should sell these, you know? And that sucks. Because like, selling an entire figure collection is difficult. There's really only one way to do it, is to sell it in bulk and give a huge discount on each figure individually. And like you end up taking a pretty serious monetary hit, but it's the level of convenience doing that compared to trying to sell each one individually and then having to package it individually and make umpteen trips to the post office is just a pain in the ass that I'm not willing to deal with. So yeah, this sucks. This really sucks. Unfortunately, though, I can't make any decision what to do without knowing more info from Mattel. I need to know what we're going to be getting, you know? What is this new line going to look like? What would be awesome is if it was 7-inch scale, just like these. If it fit in size and scale with these, and like you could collect and display them, both lines on the same shelves, and they would blend with each other. That would be awesome. I feel like that's very unlikely, though. So I just don't know. Kind of sucks, but I guess it is what it is. Really hoping that Mattel reveals a lot more at Toy Fair coming up. So yeah, that's my thing with the DC stuff. If the Mattel line comes, if they start showing it off and revealing it and it looks like ass, I think I'm probably just going to sell these, buy New 52 from DC Collectibles, and buy DC Universe Classics. And I think if the Mattel line comes out and it looks awesome and it will blend with these, great. Then I'll keep these and go forward collecting the new Mattel shit. And if it comes out that the new Mattel shit is going to look awesome but it will not blend with these, that's the one where I don't know what to do. Because it's like, it looks awesome and I want to collect it, but it's not going to blend with these. So, like, the idea of just starting it over sounds terrible. Like, look at how many fucking characters I have. That's a lot. A lot of people have way more than that. So, it really just kind of sucks that this is happening. Oh well. But yeah, anybody else that's kind of like real conflicted and with this news and information is just kind of like, man, what do we even do at this point? Leave some comments down below, get a discussion started. If anybody has any more information on this whole situation, and specifically with like what this new Mattel line of DC toys is going to be, please share in the comments down below. I'd love to know more. If you like this video, please hit the like button. That really helps out my channel. And if you want to help out the channel even more, check out some of my other videos and maybe subscribe. But other than that, I'll talk to you guys later.